And we are live on YouTube.
Hello, YouTube.
YouTube.
Okay. And so away we go. Here we are.
Come.
Hello, everyone.
Happy Hump Day.
Happy Hump Day.
Happy first day of September.
I was going to say,
well,
happy
yes.
first day of
Rabbit.
September.
You know Rabbit.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Late in the day for it, but you know, it's still the first. So
I have friends who do 3 rabbits.
Three
I'm a 2 rabbiter.
I think it's more luck if you have 3 rabbits. Okay.
I don't know.
Where did that get started?
I don't have
Oh,
a
God.
clue. I just have a friend who collects rabbits who started it with me, and so now it's a group thing.
Wow.
My high school art teacher said it in the 80s. So I don't even know when that was. A long, long time ago. So there you go.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, no. Tornadoes in New Jersey. That's just wrong, Margie. That doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
That's probably part of Ida from
Yeah, I know. It's just,
Yeah.
that's not supposed to happen in New Jersey.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Spiel time.
Real time.
Okay, so it's our Wednesday Q&A session, so I expect lots of Q&As, and to submit them, you use the Q&A button that's in the bottom of your screen if you're on a PC or a laptop, somewhere in the top of your screen, or somewhere if you're on another kind of device. We're going to use the thumbs up button, so if you see a question that you also are interested in the answer to, click that, and that'll let us know which questions need answered most. Please try and keep your chat in the chat interface. If you put a question in there that you want Tan or Michelle to answer, I may or may not catch that depending on how fast questions are flying by. So we will definitely take this week related questions first, off-roading questions last, and I think that's about it.
That is in fact it. So without further ado, let's actually start with the pre-asked questions. I have, let's see, I'm just looking over here because I've got them on my screen on that side. I have one from Roxy who says, have you developed any heuristics for picking up a color from a picture of a cone that is a good average, i.e. do you start with the lightest, the darkest, or a middle value? Honestly, I look for the one that looks most like the yarn looks in the light that I'm going to see the finished piece in. And I know that's probably not a very satisfying response, because one of the things Roxy was saying was that her light wasn't very good in the room that she was looking at. But here's the scoop. Yarn is going to look different in different lighting, and sometimes the differences can be startling. I bought a piece of fabric once in a fabric store that looked beautiful antique gold under the fluorescent lights of the fabric shop. And then when I got it home, it was this amazingly brilliant orange of a shade that I would never, ever, ever wear, at least not as a skirt, which is what I was thinking of. And so you have to be careful to, when you're trying to decide on your yarns, to take a picture of it under the light that you'll be looking at the finished product under. So if you're going to be seeing it under fluorescent lighting, you're going to be using under fluorescent lighting, try to take a picture of it under fluorescent lighting, because that's what you'll be seeing the finished product under. And because your photo may not be reflective of the actual yarn, I try to sort of cross correlate the photo back to the actual yarn. I take a look at the photo when it's actually next to the actual yarn. If you're doing this on a smartphone, you can do that relatively easily. And then I kind of put all of that together when I tried to select the color in the color editor. And so that's how I pick the color. Frequently, I'll actually have the yarn sitting on my desk, and I'll actually hold the yarn up to the screen and just make sure that I have it as close as I possibly can. Photos are good, and they're a good way to get the starting point from the photo, but you always want to get as close to the physical yarn as you possibly can. So there's no really good way to pull the thing out of the to pull it out of the photo and know just from the photo. You have to always reference back to the actual yarn, physical yarn.
Here's a wonderful suggestion.
Diane actually suggests doing a thread wrap for an inch or two, and that way you don't have to worry about the shading. That's also a really good idea. You know, that does help a lot, because the problem with cones is that they shade from the generally speaking, when you take a photo, especially with a flash, the center part of the cone is lighter, and the side part of the cone is darker because the cylinder and the sides fall off into shadow. And maybe that was the question that Roxy was asking. When I'm photographing yarns to give examples, I wrap them on a flat card. And so to give a good yarn swatch. Now, if you're doing that, then you want to wrap them as closely as possible so that no yarn is showing in between wraps on the card, and that really helps. Okay, so next question.
Let's see.
Actually, Michelle, do you have questions?
I do, but I thought one thing I might add on the last question that we had. When I have been working at yarn shows, I've had people come by, and I've gotten one since. There are handheld OT lights, those good quality sewing lights that are battery operated. And if you are looking at clothes or fabric or yarn someplace where you're not sure what the light's going to be like, if you have one of those little portable OT lights in your purse, you can really get a really good idea what it's going to look like under lights that you're more familiar with. So those little handheld OT lights are great to have to use when shopping for yarn or fabrics. So just a thought.
That's a great idea.
Okay. So, but I have a question from Pat McDonald. She and a lot of other people have had problems trying to get tends to yarn beaten in at 20 inch per inch. Now she went off road and did it with 2 heddles and is trying to get 20 EPI instead of doubled tends to 10 EPI. But either one of those are difficult. The things that you can do to get more EPI on your rigid heddle loom is to use your pickup stick. So you open the up shed, for example, throw your weft, beat it, put it in the down position, use the pickup stick to pull it forward a couple more times before you throw your next pick of weft. It makes it hard going and take a long time, but it is a way that you can increase your EPI on your rigid heddle loom while you're working with it. So I hope that answers that question for Pat and the other people that are looking to get more EPI on their rigid heddle loom.
Okay. Dawn, do you want to pull up some?
Sure, I have a question or two here. Rachel asked Michelle, what stitching density do you propose for hand-stitched hems? I expect this may vary depending on the yarn.
I try and do 5 or 6 threads. If you go across 5 or 6 threads of weft before you do your next hand stitch, you're going to have a beautiful hem. So
great.
So with 3s2, that's way less than 10s2 or 20s2, but 5 or 6 threads.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's do another live question.
Okay. This one's for you, Tien. Darlene says, sometime back you said we prefer to read colors from left to right, light to dark, because that's how we read letters. But we all seem to be putting a darker color on both sides of the napkins. Can you address?
Yes, that's actually a very interesting thing. There are two probable reasons for that. One of them is the sheer power of suggestion, because I put dark colors on both sides when I set up the exercises. And so that's part of it. The other reason is actually the more practical run, which is that we like to look at things in the center. So we start reading left to right, and our eyes always stop. The Western eye, I should say, not the Middle Eastern eye, because Arabic and Hebrew are both written right to left. But if you think about it, websites written in English invariably put their logo right up here in the top left. And that's because we start reading at the top left of a book. And so by default, we start looking in the top left of something. But our eyes are also sort of programmed to look in the center of things. And part of that just has to do with the fact that something placed in the center is a very powerful place to arrange things. It's either the first or the second most powerful place to put something if you want some people to look there. The top left is the other big place to put things. And so if you put something that's eye attracting in the center, it will really draw attention. If you put something that is less eye attracting on the outside, then it is less likely to draw attention. So let me show you what happens if you switch these two colors. I'm going to increase the size a little bit to make this easier to manipulate. So right now you've got black on the outside and white on the inside. Black on the outside and white on the inside. If I were to change that around, and I'm just going to use some gray to do the color swapping. That. And change that to black. Then we'll change that over to white. Now what's happening here is that now we've put black in the now we've put the black in the dominant position, which is in the center. So the eye will tend to look towards the center. But we've put white on the outside. And white is the color that will attract the eye more, because the eye is attracted to light colors over dark colors. And so this is subtly unsettling to the eye, because you're putting the colors that attract the eye to the left and the right, and not in the center where the eye likes to look. And so basically there's a feeling of wrongness to this, to the brain. It doesn't feel quite right in the way that the other version. I'm just going to click undo twice. So this has a feeling of calmness to it, because it's predictable to the eye. The thing that you want to look at, the light color, is in the center, which is where your eye wants to look naturally. Flipping it around puts the thing that your eye is not drawn to. Basically, it puts the things that it flips around so that the eye is looking, so that the things that your eye is drawn to are in your peripheral vision as you're looking at the piece. And the eye just doesn't like that. And so that's, I think, the reason why people are putting the dark colors on the outside. It makes a composition that's just much easier for the eye to look at, much calmer. I should add that if you put bright yellow on the outside, it would be even more disturbing, because bright yellow really attracts the eye. Try it. Okay. I've got another. Let me look at my other pre-asked question. I think it was off-roading, but let me see. Yeah, somebody was asking about color catchers versus retain, and that is off-roading. So let's see if we have other questions that are specifically related to class first. Do you have
Michelle?
are there any current ones?
Susan Cross asked, She said she wasn't sure how to press hems with the pins in them. And one of the things, it seems like the heads of the pins would be a problem. I use Quilter's glass-headed pins. I prefer them for everything, partly because I want to use less plastic in my life, generally speaking, and partly because the glass-headed pins are they press without causing any problems. They do leave a little bit of an indent when you press it, but when you stitch it and take the pins out and repress, it comes out, particularly with a good bit of steam. With really fine yarns, much finer than 10s2, where the head of the pin is the same size or bigger than the thickness of the 2 folds of fabric, this can be an issue and you need to adjust for that. With really fine stuff, I often baste or take a pin out at a time and press along behind the work. So it's the kind of pin that you use is important, and how thick the fabric that you are pressing on is important. And a press cloth is always a good idea. So those all mitigate the effect of the pins, but the pins are needed to keep the fabric in place. So I hope that's
Okay.
enough.
Okay, I have a couple of Michelle questions.
I wanted to pop in. Courtney
great.
asked if kits of yarns were going to be needed for the upcoming gradients class. So there are, and would there be colors in the Broussard yarns? So I wanted to say that there are not going to be kits per se. We will be having recommendations for yarn choices, and you'll need 1.5 ounces of each of 6 different colors, 3 for the warp, 3 for the weft. And information on choosing colors will be coming out on September 11th. And so that's the scoop on that. Let me think. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Susan asks if the lunatic fringe cones are designed to pull off the top.
Yes, absolutely. All cone yarns should peel off the top. They are not made to, there's almost no way to put them horizontally and have them unroll like a tube. Tubes are wound a little differently than cones are, and cones are meant always to feed off the top.
All right. Harriet wonders if the kits for Discover Gradients allowed for double thread weft or single thread weft.
They allowed for double thread weft on the things where you were using a double warp, because you put in fewer double picks per inch than single picks per inch. So yeah, it allows for to do either one fairly easily. So yeah.
Okay, great.
Do
you want me to keep going?
Let me see. Let me answer the question about retain. So Ann Stouffer said, I purchased some red unmercerized cotton yarn recently for another project, and the vendor included a slip of paper suggesting retain as a first wash for a piece that mixed red with lighter color yarn. My web search suggested that the most common use of retain is for washing quilt fabrics before piecing. Writers suggested that using retain on a piece that mixed red and light colors would cause any bleeding to be fixed to the lighter color. Some recommended washing such a piece with Synthropol first and then retain. Do you have any thoughts on or experience with retain? Is it worth using, or should I just use the color catcher method in the lesson? So I don't personally use retain, and so I don't have a particular, so my comments don't arise from experience. However, what I do know about retain is that the idea of retain is that it causes fabric to retain dye longer. And I know a little bit about dye chemistry, just enough to be dangerous. And things that cause dyes to retain dye longer have a tendency to be things called cationic dye fixatives, or cationic dye agents. And what they do is they fix dye to fabrics. And my guess would be, not having used it, again, if somebody has more experience with this, I'm happy to defer to them, would be that something that does dye to fabric would be more than happy to fix dye to fabric. And so if people are suggesting that if you use retain on a piece that mixes red and light colors will cause bleeding to be fixed to the lighter color. That would not surprise me one bit. Synthropol, on the other hand, is a detergent which is designed to remove loose dye. So if I were you, I would wash, and I were seriously worried about bleeding. Well, one, I wouldn't use the yarn, because why create a problem if you don't have to? And then two, if I had used the yarn, then my approach would be to wash with Synthropol, which is designed to blow away excess detergent, excess dye, and keep it in solution. And B, use a color catcher to catch the excess dye once the Synthropol takes it off, and that should be helpful. So, Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, that is perfect procedure. That's exactly what I would do. So
Okay. So, what else do you have, Michelle?
Well, oh, Michelle.
I don't really have anything else to add, but I will caution you that some people think that using a dry cleaner, taking something to the dry cleaner is going to be safer for their colors than hand washing. And just know that dry cleaning fluids are not always friendly to dyes. So if you're thinking about taking a wonderful hand woven piece to the dry cleaner, take a scrap first and let the dry cleaner dry clean the scrap, so that you can be sure that, and every dry cleaner there are several different methods of dry cleaning. There's not just one dry cleaning method. So I would have some extra fabric for that amazing piece that you've woven that you don't want anything bad to happen to, and I would take it to the dry cleaner and have them use his process on it before I gave it to him or her. So be careful about dry cleaning as well, because dry cleaning is not a surefire way to take good care of your fabric.
Somebody was asking whether to use Synthropol and color catcher in the same time in the same wash. Yes. Synthropol is a textile detergent. If you go to Dharma Trading Company, DHARMA Trading Company, you and search for it, you can find it. I'll put the name of in the chat. Dawn.
Yes. Let's see. Warp W wonders if you can increase I think she probably means the PPI on a rigid heddle loom by relaxing the tension a little.
That doesn't really work very well on a rigid heddle loom, because when you release the tension, you might be able to get a little bit more, but you're going to end up having problems because your shed's not giant anyway, and you release the tension a little and it becomes even smaller. I would go to the pickup stick method way before I would try to release it. And if I was really having a problem, I might just change the set, use a different reed. So.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Sue wonders how using black in the weft reacts in the gradient theme.
So black in the weft is basically black will create more dramatic gradients pretty much universally, because in general, the darker the color, the more dramatic the gradient, and black is as dark and as dull as you can get. And so if you take pretty much any gradient, then the black will increase the contrast and make it more dramatic. So if I were to, hang on, I'm setting up to share my screen. So screen 2. So here I am. If I were to take this gradient and replace this with black, then suddenly I have a much more dramatic looking gradient. And if I were to replace it pretty much doesn't matter what weft color I'm using. Black gives me the most dramatic gradient that I can get. If I were to change this to gray, again, that would reduce the drama of the gradient. So that's basically it. It's if you want the most dramatic gradient you can get, then you use black as the weft.
All right. Let's see. Susan had some issues untwisting 3/2 yarn in order to combine 2 single threads of different color yarns in the same shed. It was very soft and broke off. Any advice?
If she was really untwisting the 2 plies that make up a 3/2 thread, yes, those individual plies are not meant to operate on their own. It is not 2 strands of yarn that have been put together. It is 2 plies of a softer yarn that has been twisted to make an actual yarn. The 3/2 is not there are several yarns on the market, things like quilted or embroidery cottons, and some of those are yarns that are, embroidery cotton is generally 8 to 4 ply. So there are actual yarns that are meant to be stable, twisted together. 3/2 is not like that. There are very few single ply parts of a manufactured yarn that will hold up as an individual thread. So yeah, that they will come apart. That's just the nature of the way thread is built. So
Right. Somebody is asking why Lunatic Fringe doesn't have orange colors. Lunatic Fringe does have orange. It's just called yellow red because of the way that your palette is set up. It is named. Right.
we do in the new, in the tints and tones, we have tangerine. I guess that's kind of orange, but we don't have anything that's named orange, no.
Yep. Somebody was saying that Christian was asking how you can contact you to watch your warping class. Do you have an online warping class?
I have given my warping class online to several groups. I don't have an independent warping class that I'm marketing yet, but keep an eye on Lunatic Fringe Yarns, and there will probably be one right after the first of the year. So
awesome.
Yeah,
it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Do I ever use Pantone colors to design? I don't. Do you?
We do. We play around with the color of the year and that sort of stuff. We try and do we use it as a personal challenge. We've also been known to just pick a Pantone color, like from a deck of cards, to play a game with. But that's the way we use the Pantone colors. It's fun to pull one out and say, oh, what would we weave with this? And, but not in a real serious way. We really had a lot of fun with the gray and the yellow that was this year. And this little rigid heddle project is the gray and the yellow, which are the Pantone colors of the year. And we looked at them and played with it and came up with something we liked well enough to make into a kit. So I guess, yeah, we do play with them. We look at them and see what we might want to do with them, but I don't use them. We use them to play with. They're a tool. They're a crayon box to play with.
Cass is asking what a Pantone color is. Pantone is a company that puts out color swatches and color palettes and comes out with this thing called the color of the year. They're big in color. So let's see. Dawn. There's a gradient editor question. Let me answer that one.
Typing that one, so I'll skip that.
Okay. So Mary Wood says, hold on. In using the gradient editor, I was able to select a portion of the warp, but I was not able to select only a portion of the weft. Is this the way the gradient editor works? No, actually, you should be able to select a portion of the weft. If you have things zoomed out really small, you may have trouble doing that. Let me just share my screen and just quickly sort of go over how that works.
I wonder, Mary, if you're on an iPad by any chance, because that's trickier on an iPad. on an iPad than selecting the warp. So.
So if I click the gradients editor, and if I am on see how my my mouse has turned into a tiny little hand? That shows that I'm on the bar, but if I drag and I'm off the bar, then it turns into a little mouse pointer. This is if you're on a PC. And so I have to drag until it turns into a little finger again, in order for the gradient editor to be activated. And I'm off again. So let's try that again. And so frequently, if you're trying to do just a segment of it, you're a lot better off, as I'm demonstrating, if you size it up a bit to the point where you can actually see some of the boxes. And so now I'm going to select, oops, except that I haven't. Okay. So now I'm going to select something of a gradient range. And why is, okay. Okay, here we go. Huh. Interesting. That's a good question. This may be a bug. Let me try refreshing my screen, which sometimes helps. If it is, I'll take it up with Chris and he should have it fixed in a day, but let me just.
Anne just said you were in replacing colors.
Hmm?
Anne just said you were in replacing colors.
Oh, okay. Well, that would explain why it wasn't working. So let's try that again. Yeah, so now it's working. So maybe that was it. So, and you see how it's highlighting that section there? And so now that once I let go, then now it's putting me in the gradient editor. And so if I go from here to here and I pick linear, and if I size it down, it's showing me the thing. So, and that is pretty psychedelic, actually. I really like that. Anyway, so it may actually have been a modal thing, the way that I was running into. Okay, Dawn.
Right. I have one here from Shirley Bailey. She said she warped lots of napkins. Could you please talk about the procedure for joining the donut?
I think that means joining the ends when you're after when you're throwing it into the washer. That's the only thing I can think of. I just weave an extra inch of yarn, finish the raw, turn under the raw edges or do something to keep the raw edges from raveling too badly, and throw it into the washer, so that the for a top loading dishwasher, I just throw not dishwasher. Please do not put it in the dishwasher. Throw it in the top loading washer, so that the center of the donut, of course, is around the agitator. So that's how I do it. Anything to add to that, Michelle?
Actually, I don't usually turn under and I zigzag the ends and then just sew a seam either by machine or by hand.
That's what I meant.
Oh,
I don't go so
Yeah.
far as to finish it beautifully, because I'm just going to.
I've been known to lay the two ends one on top of the other like this and zigzag a couple of times over that.
Yeah.
Call it art, but
Yep.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Joy mentions that she used color catchers with red, weft, and white warp and kept washing with another color catcher until they were no longer showing a color. After that, the final wash showed no change. So they do really work.
That's great.
I usually put 4 in and just wash once, but
Well, except that the dye keeps coming out after the first wash, potentially, depending on what you dyed. Let's see.
all right, now we are
down to
off-roading.
Margaret asks, how wide of a warp will we be using for the cowl and gorgeous gradients? The answer is the finished width of the cowl is 9 inches and the width in the reed is 10 inches. So,
All right.
um,
Do we want to address Martha Naro's questions about silver and gold?
oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought you
Wanna
had that on
start
your list of questions, but are there other things in your list?
I have an off-roading question about rigid headalooms and that's
Okay.
about it.
So Martha Naro asks two questions of Michelle, but we're both going to kibitz. Well, which is to say, Michelle's going to answer, but I'm also going to kibitz. The first question was, in cotton yarns, is the color, or any natural fiber, is the color that looks silver really a shade of gray? And Michelle and I conferred, and we both agree that the answer is that silver really basically is gray. If you're talking about metallic yarns, it's gray with a little bit of sparkle to it. And in cotton yarns, it basically is really just a shade of gray.
Absolutely.
And then Martha's other question was, what colors make up the hue gold? And so she says that she's contemplating gradients in whites to gray to black. And the gold comes to mind due to the gorgeous graphite and gold shawl woven with tubular spectrum yarns.
That is an incredible shawl. It's quite beautiful, but yeah.
And then gold, to my mind, and of course, gold can be anything from antique gold to almost copper, is basically a yellow or a yellow to yellow orange that has, maybe if it's an antique gold, added had a little gray or black added to it. So like the lunatic fringe gold looks to me like a yellow orange with a little bit of gray added to it. It's not quite as brilliant as the yellow orange. Anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, that is absolutely the way it is. And when we developed the tints and tones, all those colors like the gold that you see on our list was based off of a color that was in the original color wheel, because we wanted to make sure that all those brilliant colors went well with the toned down colors as well. So the gold is based off of 5 yellow red and has been toned down with grays and whatnot to make it the color that we like. So yes, golds are a toned down yellow red or orange, orange.
Great. Okay.
I have a couple here, and then we have to talk about your scarf, Michelle. What's the purpose of making a donut out of that fabric, of sealing the two ends together?
Oh, if you have a top loading washer, I keep wanting to say dishwasher. Clothes are not dishes. You can tell what's piled up in my sink. If you have a top loading washer, you have an agitator. And in my experience, what happens if you put a very long piece of fabric into a top loading clothes washer is when you open that washer, once you're done washing your fabric, you have a very long twisted rope that may or may not, hopefully not, but more as often as not, has permanent wrinkles into it because it has been so has been so, my brain, has been so tightly twisted that the wrinkles are in there darn near permanently. And so if you stitch the ends together to make that donut, then that doesn't happen.
Perfect.
I always had them end up in a ball that looked like a basketball, squished over on the sides.
With those permanent creases.
Yeah, if you have a long piece and you want to put it in the washer, making it into a donut is a really good idea.
Thank you. Joy wonders if Tencel is as durable as cotton for warp.
It depends on the Tencel, but in general, no. Tencel is an extruded fiber, which means it doesn't have the individual fiber strength that cotton has because it's not made from little bits and pieces. It It's also made from a slurry that has taken the fiber attributes of long, skinny pieces of stuff and been turned into a liquid. There are Tencells that are Ramie or a bast fiber that have then been spun that are not extruded, but they are very, very rare, and you have to look really hard for them.
Well, Tencel is a form of the brand name is Lyocell, and it's a rayon, but it's stronger than most rayons, but not as strong as cotton, and it's weaker than when it's wet, like pretty much all rayons.
Pretty though.
Yep.
Let's see. So Michelle, you want to talk about your scarf?
Sure, I kind of thought about mentioning it when we were talking about black, because this is the poster child of this is Jennifer Moore's. This is 10s to cotton threaded at 40 ends to the inch with double weave sections that are 3-1-1-3 squares with black weft woven in a twill, a straight twill. And it's amazing because being 40 ends per inch of 10s to cotton, you would think it could stand up by itself, but it is, I don't know if you can tell by looking at it, it's just as drapey and lovely as it could possibly be. And it has all 20 colors of the original color gamp in it, and it fades from it. Jennifer has a way of threading 4 colors and then moving over, dropping one of the 4 and picking up the 3 in the next of the 4. And it gives you this really, really beautiful gradient shift from one side to the other. So
gorgeous.
Okay.
Anybody have any feedback on front loader clothes washers? Sharon's twists her stuff too.
I have not tried doing long pieces of fabric in my brand new front loader clothes washer. Michelle?
I have, in general, I'm a hand wash kind of person, and if I was going to do it in a washer, I wouldn't put any more than 4 or 5 yards. I would make a space between 4 or 5 yards and make donuts that you can slip and make donuts, because when they're in a donut, whether they're just in a front loader or a top loader, there aren't loose ends of fabric to twist around one another. You know, there isn't a bitter end to get tangled on anything. So shorter bits sewn together are going to be your friend. Or we always hand wash the first time and then make it into the smaller garment type pieces and then and then rewash. So you will also have issues with a front loader as well as with a top loader. Fabric gets tumbled around itself over and over again, and it tangles itself no matter what you do. So, well, not no matter what you do, it will tangle itself if you don't take measures for it not to. And making a donut, making something that doesn't have ends that can twist around each other, making sure that you don't have little pieces of thread sticking out that to catch on things will make it less tangly, even in your front loader, in either your front loader or your top loader. So.
Okay, so I'm going to answer a couple of questions about gorgeous gradients, since I see we're getting down to a bunch of questions about gorgeous gradients. Can 8-2 Tencel be used? Yes, but you will be off-roading. We will have instructions for 8-2 cotton, which is the same size as 8-2 Tencel, but we won't be giving directions for 8-2 Tencel specifically. So let's see. Somebody's asking, would black, grays, and white be appropriate for gorgeous gradients? You can certainly do gradients in black, grays, and white. There's nothing wrong with choosing those colors. The main thing is that black, grays, and white are neutral colors, and so you won't be getting to explore the interaction of different hues. So some of the things about color mixing you won't get to explore, but you'll get to explore interactions of colors with neutrals, which is actually a very interesting thing to explore as well. So yes, you can. You will be exploring different things from some of the other students, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. How long a warp do you need to put on? It depends on whether you're doing rigid heddle or shaft loom. Michelle, do you remember the warp lengths off the top of your head?
I
I want to say
either
it's,
2.5 and 3 or 2 and 2.5. And no, I'm sorry. I had too
I-
many numbers through my head today to remember that one.
yeah, I don't remember it off the top of my head either.
Around there.
Hold on a minute, wait, I think I have them here. While that file is opening, oh, here we go. 2.5 yards for the shaft looms and 2 yards for the rigid heddle. And yes, you will be doing some sampling before you leave the actual cowl. There was one more question, which was from Christian, about the reversible designs. So this is actually really interesting. And so I'm glad you asked this question, because it actually is interesting for even for people who aren't taking the class. So the story with reversible gradients is that obviously not all drafts look the same on front and back. The ones we've been doing in Discover Gradients are, of course, the same on front and back, because it's plain weave, which looks the same. But in Gorgeous Gradients, we're going to be talking about twills. And a 3-1 twill looks different. On the front, it's warp dominant, and on the back, it's weft dominant. And so if you have a 3-1 twill, you can do a double gradient, a warp gradient, and a weft gradient. And so you can have something that looks like this on, let's see, let me back up just a little bit. So you can have something like this, which looks like, which has a curve. This has a curved gradient, 3 curves on the front. And then on the back, it has a linear gradient. And that, of course, looks very different on front and back. And so that's the idea of a reversible gradient. Now, in Gorgeous Gradients, we're going to talk about how to do this with 3-1 twill, which is a fairly simple structure. You can do it on 4 shafts. And because the thing about twills is that straight twills and plain weave are kind of featureless drafts. They give the appearance of a solid color. And because they give the appearance of a solid color, they kind of get out of the way and let the colors do the speaking. But if you are doing a more complex draft, then you have to think about the interaction between the draft and the colors. And so that's where the deep dive comes in. And so now you have to think about what happens when the edges of your draft meet the edges of your pattern. And so this is a fairly simple pattern. And so it's not a big deal that the edges are, the edges of the stripe are crossing over the edges of the draft. But you can imagine that if you had a more complex draft, that having the edges of the stripe interrupt the draft pattern could cause problems. But if you had a more complex draft that looked different on front and back, you could have some really, really, really interesting effects if you had a warp gradient that looked different from your weft gradient, and aligned with the draft in interesting ways on warp and weft. You basically get a piece that looks completely different on the front and back. And that can be mind-blowingly interesting. And so that's basically the reversible gradient. So this is the simple version, but you can do much more complex stuff as well. So that's
Fabulous.
Parents
wondering if someone would be lost if he or she took Gorgeous Gradients without Discover Gradients first.
Absolutely not. Gorgeous Gradients sort of starts from the ground up. It's not, it covers the stuff. It covers some of the stuff that's in Discover Gradients, but it doesn't, how should I put this? It's not a repeat of Discover Gradients. It covers the same concepts, but it's not a repeat. And they're independent classes.
If people signed up by the cutoff date for getting lifetime access for Discover Gradients, would they get the recording of Discover Gradients? So
they would get the recording of Discover Gradients as well. And so if you want to
later, so you can watch Discover as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're worried about it, you could also sign up by the 5th and watch Discover Gradients in the month before class starts. So, let me see.
I have
It's a
one more
relevant one.
recorded question that you sent me, Dawn, from Roxy. She wanted me to talk more about how to measure your PPI accurately with the tension off and on and that kind of stuff. She said she found that measurements were the same over an inch or so of H2 cotton. And yes, over an inch or so, they're going to be the same. It's going to change more over longer distances. And she kind of asks, she says it gets in the way of her flow of doing things, and is saying that you need to measure your warp with the tension off, like a hard and fast rule, or is it something that's a suggestion, but people should do it the way that works best for them. And we're weavers, we're smart, we know works best for us, and we know how we measure and how we look at things. And so if taking the tension off disrupts your flow of doing your weaving, then don't do it. When you have 24 picks per inch or 20 picks per inch, the amount of difference between off tension and on tension isn't going to be huge. When you have a wider spaced warp and not as many warp ends and maybe a little bit of a stretchy yarn, it is kind of important to check your length with the tension off. But for what we're doing, if that method doesn't work for you, then you do you. We're all artisans in our own right, and if it doesn't feel right to you to do it that way, then do it the way that feels right for you. So
Janet Dawson, like, the motto is "Good cloth, happy weaver," and I think that's actually a pretty good summary of things. So, I mean, if you like the cloth and your weaving process makes you happy, then you don't need to fix anything.
Right.
If something about either of those is wrong, then you need to start looking at the process and saying, what do I need to fix? So, yeah.
Let's see. Does anybody put their fabric in a bag when using a washing machine?
I haven't yet, but I know some people do.
I've tried it and it turned into a tennis ball. So
Okay, then.
but that, it was the particular yarn and the particular fabric. So
Judy wants to know if the format Friday lessons released, Sunday noon and Wednesday 4 as Zoom days the same in the Gorgeous Gradients. Yes, it's exactly the same. Let's see. Jen says the another Janet Dawsonism, the weaving police won't come for you.
Thank goodness.
Yes, exactly. Okay, we're down to the really off-road questions, but so if anyone has other questions, feel free to chime in. But Joan asks, I think it's Joanne, right? Feel free to correct me. I know this is completely off-roading, but are these dye fixins environmentally friendly, and are any dye fixins environmentally friendly? So I don't know anything about Retain, but as far as dye fixins goes, the ones that are used for home dyers are pretty environmentally friendly. The two most common dyes that are used by home dyers are acid dyes for protein fibers, and those typically use either vinegar or citric acid, which are both things that you'll find in the pantry. Citric acid is called sour salt. It's used in some kosher foods, and it occurs actually in citrus fruits like oranges and grapefruits, which is why it's called citric acid. Or I just use vinegar. And then the MX dyes use which the Procyon MX dyes are used for fiber reactive dyes, and they use soda ash, which is a base. You use the most common use is in adjusting the pH of your swimming pool, and salt for dyeing. So that's pretty darn harmless. So if you're dyeing at home, then that's fine. Industrially, of course, there's all sorts of stuff, and it really is hard to know what your stuff has been dyed with. Anything to add to that, Michelle?
No, the salt base and acid are the citric acid are the things that we use, and they're not that bad. A lot of the stuff that gets used in natural dyeing, the mordants, the tin and the copper, and those are really environmentally unfriendly. So you got to be careful with just disposing of those things. But the chemical dyes that we use are really basically pretty good for the environment, the acid dyes and the fiber reactives. So
yeah. People are asking how long the class is going to be available online. So access is free through September 10th. On September 6th, we'll send out instructions on how to purchase lifetime access for those who want to buy lifetime access, and that will be available for $19.99. And you are absolutely welcome and we will send out reminders to, in fact, download the specs if you want to download the specs before the free access goes away. So
here's a class question. Harriet says, it looks like after wet finishing, you cut the napkins apart before you secured the ends of each napkin. Wouldn't it be better to keep from each unraveling to sew the edges before you cut them apart?
You should secure the edges really close to the time you cut them apart. If you think you're going to cut them apart and leave them lay around for a week before you get the edges finished, yes, finish them before you cut them apart. It's a process for me. I cut them apart with the rotary cutter and then take them straight over the sewing machine. And it's easier for those of us that have quilted, it's easier to do a strip piecing, run one napkin through, one napkin through, one after the other in sort of a strip motion. It's more efficient for me to do them individually. It works either way. So you do you know, happy weaver, happy cloth. So
somebody is asking if you can sign up for the Gorgeous Gradients 4-week and decide later to sign up for the last 2 weeks. Yes, you can do that. In fact, so you basically, if you decide that later that you want to sign up for the last 2 weeks, you can either email us and we'll send you a link to get the last 2 weeks, or towards the end of Gorgeous Gradients, we'll be offering people the option of signing up for the deep dive if you've changed your mind and you want to get it. Wow. That's amazing.
what?
Celia Quinn is saying that Michelle Whiplinger revamped the Thai government's 400-page natural dye manual so that they could achieve all colors using only alum, the safest mordant. The original manual used chrome, tin, and copper as well, with dyed fabrics washed in the river they drank from. Wow, that was a good deed.
Yeah.
She was an amazing woman.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Ellen says she'd also love a class on choosing thread and yarn. So that that's not an RQ, but maybe someday you can do that, Michelle.
I will make a note.
All right. That's it for questions. Anybody else have questions? Well, I will go fetch Fritz and you can think of questions while I'm doing that. Meanwhile, Michelle, would you like to, maybe you can show off some of the other stuff you've got, or you can show off your scarf again.
Okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I turned over my sheet of questions from Dawn, which I hadn't looked at the backside of. And there's a question from Kathleen, and she's been weaving on her rigid heddle loom and enjoying it for the last couple of years. She has a 15-inch Cricut. but she's finding a little bit limited and she'd like to get a larger loom and wonders if I have any suggestions of which looms to get. I am a dealer for and very familiar with the Schacht looms and the Ashford looms, and they both make 24 and 32-inch rigid heddle looms. A lot of people find that when they get past a 24 or a 28-inch rigid heddle loom, it becomes a little more difficult to handle, but it's possible. You can do, there is a 48-inch rigid heddle loom out there, so you can weave baby blankets on it. You need a pretty stable thing to put it on, but it works. Most of the larger looms, anytime you get past 20 or 22 inches, both the Schacht and the Ashfords have room for a second heddle. So they're all fun. I like the flip because to me it is the most portable. And Kathleen mentioned that she needs it to be portable to take with her. The 24-inch flip loom folds up quite easily and goes into a bag, and I've taken it weaving all over the place. And so it will take two.
Bonus cat.
Oh my!
The other one, we got both cats.
It's Tigress.
Wow. We are
Lunatic
honored.
is in Idaho. The question just piled in. So Lunatic Fringe is in Idaho. Judy would love a class on using double heddles on a rigid heddle loom. Got your pen?
I got my pen. I've got my pen.
Okay. Let's see. Shirley she made 13 napkins. They'll be washed in the bathtub the first time.
Good.
Should they be treated as one long piece or sewed as the donut?
One long piece in the bathtub works fine. I have
Okay.
washed many a yard of fabric in the bathtub. The things that we said about putting it in a dishpan or a sink, they work fine. You're not going to have the agitation that's going to cause you to get tangled or crumped up if you do it in the tub. And to do the same thing, pull it out and put it on. I pull them out and press the liquid out of them. You don't want to wring your fabric to get the liquid out of it. You want to just squeeze as best you can and then lay it on. I put a whole row of towels down, put one towel down and fabric on it and another towel and flip it over and end up with a pretty big thing. But washing them in the bathtub is a really good idea instead of throwing them in the washing machine. So I applaud her.
She's also interested in the baskets above your head.
Baskets. I don't have any baskets.
I think those, yeah, I'm guessing that.
These are wonderful. And since we have a couple minutes, these were designed by Deanna Deeds. This is part of our Master Weaver thing. These are warp rep, and Deanna originally, I don't know, I'm going to tell the story because it's fun. Originally proposed them as pot holders, and they're lovely, and we have them in 3 different colorways. And I was at the Los Angeles Weavers Guild showing off the brand new pot holders, and I said, but I haven't figured out where to put my pie. And so we renamed them hot pads. So they're warp rep, they're 4-color, and they're done on 4 shafts. They are an amazing project. They're done with 3s2 rep yarn and then a fine thread in the middle, and they're a fascinating project to weave. The mental gymnastics that Deanna, who is a master weaver, put into making these are just incredible. So they're a lot of fun.
They're great. Let's see. Janice is wondering if we can show participants napkins. Not everyone's on Facebook.
So
Have a
that's a permissions issue, and we're actually working. We'll actually try to get permissions from some people to let us. I'll probably send some out in an email. What I would do is actually go to the in-course community, which is not on Facebook, and take a look at some of the napkins there. I will say that it is less active than Facebook, but there are some of the napkins there on Facebook. It's just the issue there is that when people post their napkins to Facebook, we can't just take them out of Facebook because we don't have permission to, because we don't have permission to use their photos outside of Facebook. But I have asked, we're going to ask people to get at least permission to use some photos. And so I'll probably be sending some of them out in an email. So we're working on something. Margie is asking, if you sign up for lifetime access to this workshop and later decide that you want gorgeous gradients, can you apply the money to that class? You know, I haven't really thought about that. I think the answer is no, but email me and I'll take a minute to think about that. But at the moment, the answer is no. How many participants are in this class? About 4,500.
Do we know if the RGB or hex codes for the UK? Wow, I can't talk either, Tian. You rubbed off. UKI Astra yarn colors. Does that exist?
Not to my knowledge, but somebody may have done it.
Okay.
Okay. Sue had a question about waving with 8-2 doubled in the weft. That's more of a weaving question. Any thoughts, Michelle?
Doubled in the weft. I split the plies when starting a new color. If it's doubled in the weft, maybe just going down to one strand instead of splitting the plies would be more stable. When you change colors, you need to have, we'll be talking tons and tons and tons about how to deal with those color changes on the side. Part of, Discover Gradients was all one color weft, so we didn't talk about that at all. But if you do one strand of, if you're using a doubled 8-2, one strand of one color and one strand of the other color at the turn, you'll be plenty stable. Going to half a strand, splitting the ply apart, you can do that, but we'll really talk about that a whole lot in the Gorgeous Gradients class.
For my part, 8-2, even when the plies are split, has, if you think about it, it isn't, 8-2 is pretty darn strong. And even if you split the plies, if you're overlapping the split plies, and if it's doubled, I just can't imagine that that's going to be weak enough to be a problem. So.
While we were talking, my Katsi went and got, this is the graphite and gold scarf that somebody was talking about. And it is, it looks metallic. It absolutely shines. It looks like gold and silver, but it is just 22. It's very small, but that's what makes it really, really beautiful. So this is the graphite and gold scarf that somebody mentioned earlier.
That is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
Cynthia Newman did this. She also did this piece, these pieces, which are, the colors in these are just stunning. Yeah.
Wow.
And she did these napkins and everybody liked them so well, we decided to do a coordinating placemat.
Very nice.
Awesome.
So 3-2 is not a yarn that's easily available in Canada. We do offer an option for 8-2 yarn, 8-2 cotton, and that's available with Brassard. Judy is asking, what if you want wool? What's an equivalent size yarn? So we're only giving instructions for, and we're only supporting cotton in those 3 sizes of cotton in Gorgeous Gradients. If you want wool, you're welcome to use wool, but you're off-roading, and so you'll have to work out the equivalents yourself.
I will say that the simple is 218 merino from Jagerspun is also 24 EPI. So it would weave very similarly to the 10s2, just FYI. So.
Yep. Okay. Becky wants to know if the napkin and placemat a kit available from Lunatic Fringe. Okay. Oh, I just remembered that Chris had a question about the Hand Weaving Academy, which I alluded to a couple of times. So Janet and I are planning on launching this sometime next year, probably towards the middle of the year sometime. We haven't figured out exactly when yet. And basically we're planning on launching an online weaving school together. And our goal is basically to build a place that is as educational as a school program, like Olds or something like that. As social as Facebook, without being the evil empire. We definitely do not want the issues that come from Facebook, but we do want the we do want the social aspects of it. And as easy to access, of course, as any web browser. We're definitely doing it online. And so basically what we want to offer is on-demand classes that are available anytime. So we'll have multiple classes, and classes that are available year-round, not just a few times a year like we're doing now. But we'll have some on-demand classes that are available anytime. We'll have some live classes like the ones we have now, except that we're planning on having more teachers than just the two of us. And then we're also planning on having permanent discussion forums rather than the pop-up come and go forums that we currently have. And then we're also planning on having some interactive tools like project planners and and various calculators, warp calculators, weft calculators, and so on. And we're going to add more content and more stuff as time goes by. So that's what we're planning to have when we launch. And we're planning on adding lots more good stuff later. So
Exciting stuff.
I think that's it. Nishoni wants to know what you think of Norwood looms. I know nothing about Norwoods, except that they have good reputations.
Yeah, I've never woven on one. So
Yeah.
I find that interesting. But
So
yeah, sorry. No.
all right.
All righty then. I'm all
Okay.
set.
Absolutely no figures on the cost of the academy yet. We are still working out all the details. We will probably launch with shaft looms. Eventually, we would like to work with rigid heddle looms, but we have to start somewhere. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. We have had a wonderful time with Discover Gradients. We hope to see many of you in Gorgeous Gradients. And, well, thank you. It's been a blast.
Bye-bye.
You all set, Dawn?
I am all set. And thanks, Regina, very, very much. Made me smile.